Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AfricaNEV podcast. As usual, my name is Ashiagbor. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Livio Filice from Iguana Technologies. We want to talk about energy storage, and he's an expert on the lithium ion energy value chain from raw materials all the way up to the finished product. Livio, welcome to the AfricaNEV podcast.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. The first question is about the graph.
That was, it's a pretty exciting and interesting graph, and really it illustrates where we are right now as an industry versus where we're expected to be over the next 20 years. It really shows that the industry still is in a very, very early stage, although there's a lot of exciting developments compared to where it's going to be. And just to put that in perspective, if you look at the whole market on the energy storage side, specifically the residential energy storage market, the market in the United States is probably on a cumulative basis around 70,000 systems installed. The German market, for example, has another 200,000 systems installed. And there's obviously a decent installed base in places like Australia and Korea and Japan as well. But still, though, those numbers are very, very small in comparison to where the markets are going to be over the next decade. And that's highlighted in this chart.
So this is over 20 years, from 2020 to 2040.
Yes.
What are the underlying assumptions behind this chart?
Well, I think the big one is going to be more renewables being installed. So obviously they go hand in hand with each other. If you look at places like Hawaii, where they have net zero export limitations, you need to install battery or curtail the PV array in order to connect to the grid. So as we see more renewables, whether it's wind, solar, big theme is going to be a decrease in lithium ion battery pricing. So those are the two fundamental ones. And collectively, when you combine those two together, you're going to achieve a higher level of renewable energy generation over the next decade or two.
So you are saying that number one assumption is increase used by the for renewable energy, and number two is decreasing battery costs.
Exactly. Those are the two underlying themes. Those are the assumptions that a chart like this is going to make. Of course, there's some other ones like policy and that type of stuff, but now it's interconnected to those two themes. So once again, it's going to be an increase in renewable energy generation supported by lowering hardware cost, and also going to be decreasing costs in lithium ion battery system pricing.
Okay. I thought that maybe you also mentioned electric vehicles. How come EVs are not part of the core assumptions?
Well, that actually is tied into it. So those 2 points that I just said are at a very high level. And then there's many things like policy and infrastructure underneath those. So there's probably 10 subcategories that we can put underneath each of those macro themes. And electric vehicles is a great point, and that would fall under the decreasing cost of lithium ion battery prices. What is actually going to drive in the short term, what's bringing on or what's allowing these major battery manufacturers to invest in these gigafactories? And we see quite a few of them popping up. Hundreds of them are planned right now to go into construction or have gone into construction. So what's driving that? It's not energy storage, stationary energy storage. It's mobile transportation. The electrification of the vehicle industry is really what's driving that investment.
Okay. So you are saying that in the short term, what is driving the market is the cost decline is the EVs. But in the medium to long term, you foresee energy generation being the key drivers. Is that it?
Absolutely. In the short term, it's going to be the electrification of the automotive industry. Everything from obviously personal vehicles to mass transit, and so we're going to benefit from it. But when you look at these type of charts and you see, okay, like the rapid increase is coming after 2030, between 2030 to 2040, the market absolutely accelerates at a much quicker growth rate. And I believe that one of the factors behind that, or to support that growth in the long term, is going to be the fact that we're going to have so many second life batteries coming out of electric vehicles that once, we're talking right now, really the global penetration rate for electric vehicles, hybrid and pure electric vehicles is probably less.
That is around 2%.
Exactly. So if we even hit 10% of a market, if we take the North American market or battery and give it a second, obviously be stationary storage. So there's going to be a flood of batteries available in the next decade that obviously is not available right now, and that's going to contribute to the growth in the stationary energy storage market. It's actually going to be a cornerstone, and it's going to transform the industry. It's going to entire energy, because those batteries coming out of the electric vehicle space, we could literally take those batteries, bring them to underdeveloped or developing regions of the world where
like
energy
Africa.
Batteries initial nameplate capacity is pretty substantial because the consumption is much lower in that application. So nonetheless, there's the potential to take these batteries and bring them to places like Africa over the next decade and create micro and mini grids, which is really exciting.
Okay, so what you're saying is that because vehicles, the demand for mobility in terms of stress on the batteries is higher after the battery becomes unfit for purpose for mobility applications. They can find a second use in storage, because storage, you're not pulling as much power instantaneously compared to mobility. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean that's also a good point. I would have to agree with that. But I think it's mostly going to be related to cost. The cost of the second life battery. If you look at the vehicle cost, it's already been amortized. If I go buy an electric vehicle today, and in 5 years from now I go to decide to get a new car, and there's minimal value in that resale vehicle, somebody could take that and extract the batteries, take the batteries out of it, and apply it to another application. So I think it's still early stages, but I think that's going to be a high growth market in the next 5 to 10 years.
But that brings me to one of the key fundamentals for lithium-ion batteries, which is charge cycles. For those who are listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube, basically for lithium-ion battery cells, the more you charge and discharge it over time, they lose their storage capacity. So maybe over time, the battery can only store 80% of its original charge. And it's a function of how frequently you charge and discharge for a given period of time. Now, Livio, do you think the current storage technologies we have, the longevity of the batteries that are being manufactured, we know obviously that, there are improvements coming. Just like you're talking about million mile battery, CAT-L said they also have a million mile battery, I believe it. And that's where the industry is going. But do you think that in 10 years time, when some of these batteries are now entering this second cycle usage, do you think they will still be fit for purpose with respect to longevity and retention?
It's a good question. And obviously, I think fundamentally yes. But then you have to look at the battery chemistry. So is it going to be lithium iron phosphate, which is obviously very big in China? Chinese, that's a core Chinese technology. If you look at companies like CATL and a whole group of them, a lot of them are very advanced on the LFP. When you look at it, the LFP is giving between 10 to 15,000 cycles, or that's the expected life of those type of batteries. And then the NMC, which is the cobalt, those are expected between 3,000 to 6,000, depending on the manufacturer. So, if you took 10,000, if you took an LFP battery module at 10,000 cycles and cycled it once a day over 365, you're going to get
that's a lot of years.
over 20 years of life out of the battery module. So if you're using that battery module in a mass transit bus, which the Chinese are doing, if you look at companies like BYD, they sell an LFP into their energy storage systems, which then end up on buses. A bus probably only has a usable life of probably between 5 to 10 years in most jurisdictions. So the batteries can continue to operate well beyond that.
Okay. Of course, the exception will be Africa in terms of usage. Okay. Question. Over time, there's a school of thought that various lithium-ion technologies will be deployed for mobility depending on the type of vehicle being manufactured. Okay. So let's say in China, for example, obviously they have gone LFP, but somebody is trying to do a high performance car. The person may decide to go with NCA. Somebody is trying to do an electric bus. The person may decide to go with NCM. Somebody is trying to do a heavy construction equipment. Last time I was talking to a fellow from Finland. They may decide to use a different chemistry based on the various properties of that particular chemistry and the performance requirements of the application. Do you agree that this is a likely future for lithium-ion storage technologies? Or you feel that it will still be as it is now, where maybe one particular company will bet on a particular chemistry and use that across the entire product line?
I think it's less about betting and it's more about understanding the application. Does a high performance sports car require the same type of lithium battery as a residential energy storage system connected to a solar PV array? Like, you don't necessarily need the same type of batteries in all different applications. There's going to be some applications that are less demanding, and they have different. Even in the grid storage market, for example, when you look at a residential or a commercial energy storage system, it has different requirements than an energy storage system that's participating in a demand response program.
Okay,
so
true.
It's going to continue to vary based on application to application, and there's clearly no one size fits all in the energy market.
So now that leads me to now the value chain. Okay. So obviously, depending on the chemistry, some chemistry require cobalt, some chemistry don't require cobalt, some require manganese, some require aluminum, and all that. How do you see the value chain? What are the changes you have observed in the value chain, and what is the impact of COVID-19 going to be? Because with COVID-19, what we are seeing is that people are beginning to localize and regionalize their supply chains.
Yeah.
I know you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I know is that with the lithium ion value chain that we have currently, materials move all over. So somebody may mine cobalt in Congo, ship it to China to be refined pathway. The final refining may be done in Europe. Then it will be sent to Japan for the finished electronic product, which will then be shipped back to Africa or Australia or wherever. This is what I understand the state of the value chain to be.
That's correct. There's definitely no market that's vertically integrated from mining to finished goods. If you look at cobalt, as you mentioned, the DRC is very large in cobalt mining, but it delivers no additional value add in the supply chain. It's pretty much just a commodity that's pulled out of the ground and shipped to another part of the world to be refined and then processed. If you look at the lithium market as well, the lithium chemical market,
Yeah.
Australia, which has some very large deposits, they, up until a few years ago when there was a shortage of materials, they were literally just sending ore, lithium ore, across to China to be processed, and China was building some very large processing facilities. You could look at, and that's the hard rock side of it. There was a company here in Canada called Nemaska. Unfortunately, they've hit some financial hardship over the past year, but their vision was to extract the lithium from a very large deposit in Quebec off of James Bay, and they were going to they were in the process of building a processing plant in Montreal, and then they were going to ship ship chemicals, which would have been it could have been carbonate, or it could have been some other type of chemical that they were going to produce at that facility. So that's where the market is right now. If you look at the same thing with the South American saliers and the brine plays down there, those companies are processing chemicals, which are then being shipped to Asia for final processing and integrated into the supply chain. So it's right now the market's pretty fragmented.
But be that as it may, I think the last time we were talking, this thing came up. You see that the industry seems to be concentrated, to be controlled in large part by a few Chinese, South Korean, and Japanese companies. So how come their supply chain is all over the map?
Well, I mean, when you look at the commodities, it's all about, there's a lot of lithium, and maybe the same case on the cobalt side. I'm not so familiar with cobalt, but on the lithium side, there's deposits. I mean, I've spent 7 years investing in different lithium companies, and I mean, there's deposits in Ireland, Canada, the US. There's quite a few deposits of lithium brine throughout South America, but it really comes down to the quality and the grade and the feasibility of these projects. So although there's like large deposits of these minerals all around the world, it comes down to who has the best projects, and capital will always go to the best projects. That's a given. So what's happened is that the Chinese were the first to move with lithium batteries on a large scale. If you look at some cities, there's some stats out there, and I mean, you can research them, but some of these cities have already switched over tens of thousands of mass transit buses to electric drive. So the Chinese are not sleeping like the rest of the world. They're moving, they're very aggressive, and the government has specific mandates in place. So what we have seen in the market is, yes, although it might look like it's fragmented, the reality is that the bulk of the supply chain is actually controlled, as you said, by the Chinese or by the Korean or Japanese industrial companies. So there's been a lot of M&A, a lot of merger and acquisition that has happened over the past 24 to 36 months, and the supply chain is now starting to pivot.
In what direction?
Well, I think it's becoming more secure and more reliable. When you look at battery production, there was significant shortages across the board from pretty much everybody. But now that the supply chain's in place, everything is running much more smoothly. Batteries are more available, lead times are shorter, and the prices have actually come down. There was a point in the past couple of years when lithium battery prices were actually going up, and that was because of too much demand and not enough supply. We've seen chemical prices go up, and some battery manufacturers started adding surcharges, cobalt surcharges, and lithium carbonate surcharges and stuff like that, because the prices of those chemicals have actually gone up. And a great example is LCE. So lithium carbonate equivalent prices went from around $4,000 in 2013, 2015 time range to as high as $15,000 to $20,000 a ton in 2018. So prices went up more than double, tripled actually, and quadrupled in some cases
that's
over the past couple of years. Since then, obviously high prices attract more supply, and the prices have come back down to around $5,000 a ton for lithium.
So my next question has to do with the time lag with the lithium ion value chain. You know, the source of raw materials, it's not like something that you can just go and pick and then put into the supply chain. You have to mine it. So as demand is increasing per the charts that they share with us, obviously we need to go to look for that demand. You have to go and prospect for the sources for, if it's lithium, where the lithium is. We need to now set up a company to go and extract the lithium. All this takes time. We have to look for money to finance this whole operation before the material will be ready to be processed. How is the industry going to manage that demand gap? Because Tesla is ramping up. It's becoming ridiculous. It's like almost every month now there's a rumor of a new gigafactory somewhere. Whether it's true or not, there's a rumor. China, they are aggressive, but the raw material itself for the energy storage, it's not like if I announce 1 million cars.
Yes, that's correct. Right. So you're talking about the need to increase activities in the mining field to meet future demand. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So obviously, so there's so what happened in the past couple of years was pretty interesting, because in order to ramp up the industrial supply chain, which was obviously the mining, the battery production capacity, and getting that to market, it's a lot quicker for a large number of individuals to go purchase electric vehicles. So the supply chain was not able to respond quick enough to the market demand. So that's what happened. But now the supply chain has balanced out. So it's important to actually understand like how much commodities or chemicals are required to feed new battery production facilities. There could be a shortage at some points. But in the past couple of years, there's been a substantial amount of investment in the commodity and chemical side, and also in the technology side, which is reducing the amount of cobalt and other chemicals that are required per battery module. So when you look at all three of those, and you look at where the investment has gone, the investment really hasn't gone into new lithium production facilities. A lot of it has gone into the processing side of it in China, and then into South America. South America has some of the largest lithium brine operations in the world, and China has put a lot of money into the processing side as they're receiving ore from Australia and other countries. So I think the market's pretty balanced. I think the investments are happening, but it's not going to be a situation where they're going to need 10 new cobalt mines overnight or 10 new lithium sites overnight, because you're going to see incremental expansion from existing facilities and existing mines. They're going to receive the capital first, and then some new greenfield projects could come online over the next few years. So what I was saying is, some people expect that there's going to be a wave of new demand for these battery metals. And the reality is that although demand is increasing, a lot of the new supply is coming from existing facilities.
And that is because we are learning to use the materials more efficiently. So we need less of each material, of the materials.
Exactly. So part of it is coming from innovation. A lot of researchers are working on figuring out how they can reduce some sensitive chemicals or commodities such as cobalt. So you've seen a lot of announcements come out over the past couple of years. Researchers are working towards that. Also, the other thing as well is that if you have an existing facility that is mining cobalt or lithium and it's already financed, it's much easier to expand a facility that's already operational compared to financing a greenfield project.
Oh, okay. So brownfield is easier from a financial perspective.
Exactly. Existing facilities, because it's de-risked, it's already generating cash flow, and you already have investors behind it. So a lot of the new capacity on the battery metal side is coming from existing facilities. And plus, if you look at some of who the big players are, like SQM in South America, I'm familiar with a company called Orocobre out of Australia. They have a facility that they operate for the past 5 years in Argentina. They have very strong investors behind them, and they are currently expanding their facility. So a lot of new capacity is going to come from existing facilities.
So in other words, even operationally, it's even beneficial to expand a brownfield site than a greenfield site.
Yeah, I would say yes. Also, keep in mind that something that I learned is that there aren't that many people that have deep understanding.
How many people that have deep understanding of what?
So I think general knowledge is pretty limited in the industries that we're speaking about.
Yes.
So once again, that's another reason why the industry is looking for expansion from existing facilities versus greenfield projects.
Okay. Let's switch it a bit. How do you see this development impacting Africa from the perspective of adoption? Because once affordability, the batteries become more affordable, obviously a lot of people are going to start using it more and more because of our energy deficit. But from the charts that we are looking at, I think Africa is grouped with others. So I see other.
So I think, in terms of economic opportunity, obviously, Africa is a very mineral-rich region, so there's tremendous opportunity for further exploration activity, and then if they maybe even processing, I don't know, but maybe in the long term there is an opportunity there on the commodity and chemical side. And I think really what's going to impact underdeveloped regions of Africa is going to be a tidal wave of second life batteries that are going to become available over the next decade, and be able to take these batteries and create mini or microgrids out of them. And then that really creates a tremendous opportunity for energy as a service, pay for energy as you go, very much like the cell phone market. And I see the same type of situation emerging in Africa.
Actually, to corroborate what you are saying, already that business model is receiving traction. We know of a number of companies on the continent that are doing that. Yes, was it? Today is Wednesday, so this Sunday I was having a conversation with a Kenyan, and it's a business model that they are also using there all across the continent. The pay as you go model is gaining traction because of the affordability and the need for less upfront capital outlay.
Yeah, so you said that business model is already being implemented in certain regions, correct?
Yeah, in Africa, like we know of, AfricaNEV, we are a continental group, so we have people from all across the continents. Not every country, but we are all over, and we do things that we have to relate to people from the various countries, and you see that the pay as you go model is picking up currently because of the cost of storage. What you see is that
yes,
the CNI segments, the commercial industrial users, those who use energy, most of the energy during the day, they are keen. They are actually exploring the market. But you also see that from the service providers perspective, there are those who are well financed and there are those who are not so well financed. And most of the people who are not well financed are the indigenous companies. All right. A couple of the indigenous ones are well financed, and then also those who are coming from outside, either they have a JV or they are coming to set up here locally. They seem to have some capital, so they can afford to get the equipment, install, and do the pay as you go model for now. I hope you understand. The only other challenge, or the challenge that I see for now, is that there is a lot of there's a lack of awareness in certain cycles. Solar is still perceived as a high cost option to a lot of people. But within a year or two, people should become more comfortable with the costs of solar. I hope I've answered your question.
So obviously with renewable energy pricing continuing to decrease or to decline, and also batteries expected to be much more readily available in the next few years, I think that's, as I said before, that is a spot, or that's an industry that's really going to come into play in Africa.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not just, and it's also, if you look at South America, a lot of islands as well. The island nations, I think, are going to benefit greatly from floods. So I think my belief is that electric vehicles, adoption of electric vehicles in developed regions of the world are going to have a material impact on energy infrastructure, energy reliability and availability, in underdeveloped parts of the world once those electric vehicles start coming off of the market.
I think I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Without,
so, I mean, that's you know, God, that's probably the thing that's probably the topic that I'm most excited about.
Which is? Which topic are you most excited about?
Oh, it's about the opportunity to bring stable and reliable energy to underdeveloped regions of the world.
Okay. I said, how did you get into the energy storage space?
Yeah, it's a long story, but when I was younger, in high school, as a teenager, interested as a teenager in the space, and then as I went through college and university, I just decided that I wanted to focus my career in the clean energy space. So it's been probably 13 years working professionally in different technologies with different companies, everything from solar to wind to energy storage for the past 7 years. But I've probably for the past 20 years, I've been very passionate about clean technologies and being more sustainable as a society and investing in the supply chain.
Yep. So tell us a bit about Iguana Technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. So Iguana is a very unique company because it possesses a power electronics platform, which is probably amongst the highest rated efficient inverters in the space in its power class. So the company has a long history, about 2 decades in power electronics, in a number of different fields, including solar, fuel cells, and also energy storage. The company today is entirely focused on grid-connected energy storage systems. It has a number of residential energy storage systems and also commercial energy storage systems. Today, the company is active in all key markets, including Australia, the United States, and Europe.
Okay. So you spoke about Iguana is active in residential and commercial, but in what way? How do you differently target the commercial market and the residential market? What are your approach to these two different markets?
Yeah, so the markets are different in every part of the world. Quite frankly, why somebody would buy an energy storage system in Germany is going to vary radically different than Puerto Rico or California or Hawaii. And then once again, if you look at the Australian market, it's also very different there. Primarily in the residential market, the key themes are resiliency and backup power. We see that obviously being a major theme in California and also in a number of island regions. In other markets, such as Australia and Germany, homeowners are investing in energy storage because the government or the utility or whomever has dismantled net metering programs. So the rate at which you're paid to export solar power is lower than the retail rates that you pay when you consume electricity. So of course it makes most sense to put battery storage there so that you can you can store and consume the power you use during the day. That's the residential market. And there's a number of different reasons why homeowners around the world are purchasing battery storage systems. In the commercial space, it's more about peak shaving and mitigating demand charge management expenses.
Have you guys thought about Africa as a market? What are your plans for Africa?
The African market, yeah, I mean, there's definitely been I mean, right now we have there's so much interest and installations and projects that are underway that are keeping us busy. But as a whole, I think that a lot of people in the industry are looking at Africa as a major growth market. And I think it's going to start happening in the next 5 years. Battery prices, as I said before, battery prices are going to be in other developing regions of the world based on more battery prices have already come down substantially, don't get me wrong. But I think prices need to come down even more to open up a mass market in Africa. I think that's going to happen when electric vehicle sales take off, and then those cars start to come off the market. And then there's going to be real investment into repackaging these batteries for microgrid and mini grid applications. So I think, so I would say over the next 5 years, many companies are going to be working in Africa to bring clean and reliable and predictable energy to cities and towns.
Okay, so like for you, if you were coming to a region like Africa, this is a speculative question. So please just answer the.
Sorry, say that again, God.
I'm saying that this is a speculative question. Okay, so you just feel free to answer it the best way you can. What will be your approach, generally speaking? Will you prefer your market entry strategy? Will you be working through distributors, dealers, agents, or you would like to control the value chain yourself?
When entering a market, it's always best to leverage existing people that know the industry, that know the space, that know the local customs, and that can quickly bring products to market. I can tell you, based off of working in a number of different markets, it's always best to leverage local relationships. So we'll continue down that same path and leveraging relationships that are being developed.
So in case somebody is listening to this podcast right now and he is considering an opportunity like this, because some of our friends are into solars, inverters, electric mobility, and all manner of stuff. What will be the requirements, and how do they proceed if they want to get in touch with you? And I'm talking about Iguana, to start a relationship like this or start a conversation to see where it will lead up to.
Okay, can you just repeat that one more time, please?
The question is, if let's say I am listening to this podcast right now, and I'm thinking, oh, this Livio guy, he seems to know what he's talking about. Went to your website, went to read a bit about Iguana. Okay, I would like to partner with them, maybe be an agent, a distributor, a reseller, or in whatever capacity. What will be some of the things that you'll be looking for in a potential partner like me?
Yeah, so there's always interest in expanding into new geographical markets. Obviously, so as we, whenever I look at a new market, it's always based on the technical side of it. What are the local grid requirements, interconnection voltages, that type of stuff? Do the products align with what the local technical needs are? So that's one. Partnering up with the company that's able to provide first and second level support. That's important. And then I think fundamentally, it's about what is the opportunity. So there's a lot of interest right now from pretty much every region of the world to bring energy storage technologies to local markets. But it's always going to be which markets require the attention today.
So it's about ROI.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so let's
More
break
like
that.
you have so much resources that you can spend.
You have to pick your targets because the opportunities are limitless. You cannot just pray and pray. You have to pick the particular markets you can service.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's break that down. When we talk about technical requirements, I'm assuming you're talking about the voltages and all that of the particular country's grid infrastructure, because you are into
Yes.
grid tie systems. Okay, that is pretty clear and straightforward enough. Now, when you talk about first and second level support for a potential partner, local partner, can you explain that? Because first and second level, it sounds very vague and arbitrary. What is first level support? What is second level support?
Well, of course. So there's a couple of points to consider
Okay.
when you're talking to any new partner. For example, there's the pre-sales activity, which includes system design, permitting, and providing that level of training to the actual installer. So there's a number of items. You don't just pick up a battery system and go out into the field and install it. You need to permit it. You need to plan it. You need to train the actual electricians or the installers on how this thing is going to operate. So there's that side of the support. And then there's the post-sales support, which is also very important. So in the event of there's any issues with the technology, if you look at what we're selling or what the industry is selling, being these energy storage systems, these are consumer appliances. That's how I've always looked at these. This is no different than a fridge, a furnace.
Very interesting.
And if your fridge breaks down, there needs to be local support, needs to be a system or replace it.
Okay. So when you talk about training, okay, are you talking
Yes.
about let's say your local representative training other industry players? So let's say company A is the representative for Iguana Technologies. So maybe other solar installers that are coming to buy your equipment from them, they will train their staff, or you're talking about your representative training its own staff. Which is it?
It's a combination. If I'm understanding you correctly, it's a combination of both.
Okay.
So what you'll see with a lot of technology companies when they're going into new markets, they will do a train the trainer approach. So they will have, depending, it could be one person inside a company or it could be 10 people, depending on the companies that are working together. But generally, you're looking for a partner that has a certain level to a group of people within an organization that can then go out and train their team of technicians and sales representatives. So it's a train the trainer approach in most cases.
Okay. Is there a financial requirements too? In other words, apart from the pre-sales and the post-sales activity, if I want to partner with Iguana, is there a certain amount of capital that I should be ready to invest in the partnership, which would then determine maybe the level of the partnership from the beginning? Maybe you require me to buy a certain number of inverters, or I mean make a deposit. Is there something of like that also included in the requirements?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I mean, every company is has certain programs in place,
Okay.
and that's generally when we talk about picking our targets, you're looking at opportunities that are real, that have substance to them, and they're capable of generating revenue in the short term. So that's definitely, I think, everyone's looking at that.
Okay. So in terms of the market opportunity, that is a function of the country. Can you define that for us in a bit? Maybe What do you mean by a good market? What makes a market a good market for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the markets that we are active in today include Australia. So we have quite a few years of experience operating in Australia in the residential market. We have over 6 years experience operating in Hawaii and a few other Pacific islands. Mainland Australia, mainland USA, that is a market that I'm very excited about. I think there's tremendous growth ahead of the industry, especially in places like California. And then you have the Caribbean islands. I'm very excited about the Caribbean islands. I've been working in those islands for the past 7 years, and I think that's only going to grow. And then, of course, like the European market is already is very good sized market, and it's going to continue to grow. So I think those are the highest priority markets.
Okay. I think I understand perfectly. One last question before we wind down. With respect to the value chain, you did make an excellent point about how technology improvement is driving down the amount of materials that are needed. Okay. How will the impact of recycling, the recycling impact the value chain? Because if, let's say, we expand your mines right now to supply the market, and then after 10 years, now some of these batteries that have been used are now being recycled. The materials are being extracted to recycle for new batteries. How would that affect the entire value chain?
Well, I think like in most industries, obviously you need mass adoption to obviously trigger recycling programs. I think that's true in the personal computer and laptop space, in the home television space, in a number of different scenarios. Now, in most developed parts of the world, those recycling programs are a given. They're included now. You pay for the recycling fee upfront when you purchase the hardware. So I don't think that's going to be any different once we reach scale in the stationary energy storage market, and probably also in the electric vehicle market.
Anyway, Livio, I am very grateful for your time. Even though the internet has made it very difficult for us. So anybody listening to this or watching this on YouTube, we are seeing an audio because we had problems with the internet connection. That is how come an audio. Thank you very much, Livio.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure is all mine, and we'll talk again soon.
Yes. One question.
Yes.
What do you expect battery prices to be when Tesla's announce the battery prices Tesla will announce during their battery investor day? Do you believe they will announce something like 80 kilowatts, $80 per kilowatt hour.
Based on what, a new battery chemistry, or what's the expectation?
Improvements in the various battery chemistries, because from all indications, they're talking about incremental improvements in, let's say, NCA, which is what they use. So incremental improvements. Do you believe $80 per kilowatt hour is feasible and practical?
I mean, I don't think. Look, the battery prices were over $1,000 a kilowatt hour, probably 10 years ago.
10 years ago, yeah.
Dollars a kilowatt hour. So, if you look at where battery prices were and where they are now, if we applied the same price reduction strategy to, starting at whatever $300 a kilowatt hour right now, to say we get down to $80 is not that aggressive compared to where battery prices were 10 years ago. So is $80 attainable? Absolutely. I think it was more difficult for prices to go from $1,000 down to $300 a kilowatt hour. To bring them down to $80,
it's easier.
Probably we're not far off, right?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Pleasure's all mine. We'll talk soon. Thanks, God.
All right. Bye.